Joining me now to discuss this perspective on his perspective on what happened is someone who was part of the hearing and had some good questions of his own, Congressman Dan Bishop. In addition to being on the Judiciary Committee, he also serves on the Committee on Homeland Security and represents North Carolina's 9th District. Congressman Bishop, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Joseph. Good to be with you today.
You were there yesterday. What did you learn during that hearing?
Well, it was an interesting exchange of views. I think the entire hearing, the premise of the hearing, it was inappropriate to have a hearing by the Democrats calling that hearing while the Dobbs case is pending for decision. Of course, we've had the leak of the draft opinion. Certainly, I think seeing that was, you learn something about what Democrats will do to continue to override and trample upon institutional norms. But the witnesses' testimony itself and their answers to questions like Mike Johnson's question you played, those were informative too. We are dealing with an extraordinarily radical mindset that wants to see babies killed until the moment of birth. And it is an extraordinary thing to see, a spectacle, but it is also instructive.
I think that's true. And I think the cameras in the room during those conversations are actually very helpful, because this isn't a Twitter conversation where it's regulated. They're required to answer questions, and you can see the weakness of the position in some of these cases. Now, you may have answered this already, kind of, but do you agree with Representative Fischbach and her assessment that the purpose of the hearing was not really to learn anything or advance public policy, but to try to influence the outcome of an unyet decided Supreme Court case?
I do, Joseph. I think that was what the plan was. You know, we actually aired this issue. Democrats had another hearing some months ago, sort of because the Dobbs case was on the court's calendar. And the issue was aired then. Frankly, that was inappropriate as well, because that was the occasion for putting it on, that it was on the court's calendar. But now to do it again and have some of the same ideas trotted out, I do think it's improper. And we have this long series, Joseph, of events where the Democratic Party has been willing to trample institutional norms time and time again. They want to pack the court. They want to make D.C. a state. They want to take over all election regulation in Washington. It goes on. And that is something that is very dangerous to our republic over time.
And that is true, but I do want to get to an exchange you were part of yesterday during this hearing. You asked an entertaining and interesting question of Amy Arambide, who is there from a pro-abortion group in Texas. Let's play clip 3.
What do you say a woman is?
I believe that everyone can identify for themselves.
Okay. Do you believe then that men can become pregnant and have abortions?
Yes.
Congressman Bishop, why did you ask that question?
Anticipated that the response would be strange. And I think it's revealing. It sort of always makes me think of Romans 1, I think it's verse 22, they pretending to be wise, they became fools. And you see all the party that supposedly embraces science, in fact, doesn't seem interested in science at all. They're often some very weird kind of thought process. But, you know, and in fact, it's very interesting, Joseph, that little exchange has blown up on the internet, over 2 million views just on the House Judiciary Committee's tweet of it. And I actually find it very enlightening to see the two sides responses to that. Actually, a little earlier exchange I had with an abortionist who was there, a medical doctor, over what a woman is, and her recalcitrance about answering the question. But it's revealing about these two mindsets in the country. And I think what I celebrate is we all have cause for hope that we're getting ready to embrace a rational point of view and philosophy. If the court will relent on this Roe versus Wade that's been in existence and inappropriately so for 49 years, we're going to be able to return this to appropriate debate and decision at the state level. And we have an opportunity to reaffirm our support for life. And my goodness, all you have to do is read the Declaration of Independence, right? The inalienable rights that come from God because we're creatures of God, created by God. Life is the first one: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that's why government exists. So we get an opportunity to reaffirm that. Hopefully, if the Supreme Court will have the solid, will follow through on what they've preliminarily planned to do.
We certainly hope and pray so. But you're right. A couple of the headlines, your question there that has gone viral for good reason, because this idea that anyone can become a woman, that men can get pregnant and have abortions, it is a radical position that most Americans don't share. And then the exchange with Congressman Johnson there about the fact that what's the difference between a born child and a child 8 inches up the birth canal? And they have no answer to that question. And these conversations really are exposing, I think, the extreme positions that the left has taken on these really fundamental questions. Last question for you, Congressman Bishop, on this issue, though. There are concerns. The Department of Homeland Security memo has warned about the possibility of violence once the Supreme Court releases its final ruling in this Dobbs case. Do you see that as a real threat?
I would rather not say that I think that's a big threat, Joseph. I think the right thing to do here is we solemnly proceed with our responsibilities, and the Supreme Court needs to meet up with that. We need to count on the American people to do the right thing. And the heartening thing for me about that thing that went viral, it's seen over 2 million views. The reason there have been 2 million views is not for those few out there who have attacked me for asking the question. It is because most Americans look at that and they just say, as a matter of common sense, that's not right. And all those good Americans are also going to stand up for law and order. I think we'll have the result that we need to have. We need to, and we will stand for law and order and see to it that law and order prevails.
That's exactly right. Another topic for you, Congressman, if I may. The House today passed a bill calling for the formation of a domestic terrorism office within the Department of Homeland Security. You voted against it, as did all but one Republican. What are your concerns about that bill?
Joseph, they've begun using, you said it in your lead up, they talk about everything being white supremacy. The idea of terrorism, since that the nation suffered grievously on 9/11, and of course there is such a thing as domestic terrorism. We saw it in the bombing in Oklahoma City in 1995, I believe it was. That's a serious issue, and we need to be united in dealing with it. But Democrats, amazingly, in another, maybe most significant institutional norm they've trampled, they've begun using domestic terrorism as a political smear against their political opposition, the entire Republican Party. It's an astonishing thing to behold, and it is the most irresponsible act I've ever seen in government. But I watched that bill come out in the Judiciary Committee. I've seen how they deal with it, the Democrats do. And there were many Republicans actually who voted against that bill on the floor. I'm grateful for that. But this is not something that we can play politics with. Terrorism, it just, I mean, to say that almost as if that's not self-evident to everybody, they need to get away from government and out of power.
It is concerning that the idea of domestic terrorism that terrorism in general would become a partisan issue, because the implication there is that a significant percentage of Americans are terrorists. If there's anything we should be able to unite against and around, is the idea that terrorism is something we reject, that we are not participating in. And I think you're right that a lot of us see the creep where this is becoming something that this issue is being politicized rather than in good faith bringing people together to make sure terrible things don't happen. On that point, 30 seconds, the Disinformation Board has been paused by the Biden administration. Do you think that's a good development?
I think it is a telling admission, Joseph. It is an admission that they knew they were being destroyed in the court of public opinion, because no such idea has ever been heard from in the United States government, that they're going to regulate what people say. I mean, it's just, in fact, it's hard to know what candidate it is that's the worst, but that one is another good candidate. I'm glad they've backed away from it. I think they are reeling politically. They know they're badly damaged.
It does seem that way, and they should be. Congressman Dan Bishop, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Joseph.